My New Normal podcast. I am here with Max Conserva from goodleg.org and a coach up at San Francisco CrossFit. So welcome, Max. I'm coming to you from my garage in San Diego, and Max is where? Where are you, Max?
I'm in Tiburon, California. In my
really horrible view. You want to show them your view of your awful, absolutely awful. Yeah. So we're in both very zen places. I want to fill you in today. This is a very special guest and a very special friend of mine. We met about 6 years ago. Kelly and Juliet Starrett from San Francisco CrossFit reached out to me and knew I was into working with adaptive athletes, those the society would consider disabled. However, these athletes are the I can of those. We consider them adaptive because they have chosen to find ways to do things that others might say they can't or think they can't. And Kelly and Juliet reached out to me and told me about Max and how he was coming down to San Diego to visit, and I had to meet him. So long story short, we did link up at Fathom CrossFit. My friend Alec Zirkenbach ran that gym, and we met and hit it off right away and actually filmed a video there because I was starting to get into filming and watching myself on video and trying to speak eloquently into a video. And I think so we ended up filming a front rack or a front squat video, and so I think Alec was in it, you were in it, another athlete was in it, and all with different impairments, movement impairments. And that video in our world went kind of viral because every time I had a couple athletes reach out to me and say, hey, I saw you in that front squat video that you did with Max. And I think, Max, you got some of the same messages to you. And I was like, man, this front squat video is really taking off. Anyway, we were also commenting on how tan you looked then. You kind of look tan now, probably tanner than me.
I've been trying.
Yeah. San Francisco doesn't get...
I need to work on it.
Yeah, we all do. I get more sun down here, though, than you do up in San Francisco. But yeah, so since that time, I even think we filmed another video that same weekend or another weekend you were down, and that video is definitely on the internet still. I think it's on my Movement RX website, so I'll be putting that in the show notes, all the videos that Max and I did together. But it's been an awesome relationship because I've been able to bounce ideas off of him about this whole adaptive movement, what adaptive means, what it's like to be an adaptive athlete. And he's also, just shown me better ways to educate the public, educate coaches. And eventually we actually came together and also designed the CrossFit adaptive course when they were first looking to do that. We both made a decision not to continue working with CrossFit. However, we were able to develop an online course together this just actually a year ago in August that took, took months in the making. I was pregnant and just had my baby, which was very chaotic. And he definitely has patience, a lot of patience. We're able to put out this online course, and eventually we're going to have a summit, an in-person summit. So it's been a really awesome journey with you, Max. I've learned a ton from you. You're a good friend. You've always provided great advice. So excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to ask you a very burning question because you are a man of thought and intellect. What is one of your favorite quotes?
So I'm not good at these questions. I don't really carry a bag of quotes in my mind. Even though I probably read a lot of quotable people, I just don't have a good memory. So I'll read you a quote that I actually read this morning. So I usually read in the morning, and it is...
Good time of day.
I actually have it next to me. It is, what chance makes yours is not really yours. And so this is a reminder that so much of our life is just up to chance, and you can't take credit for everything that happens to you. And on the flip side, you can't feel responsible for everything that happens to you. You can just do the best you can with the cards you're dealt, and things are going to fall out how they
Right.
fall.
I like it. It's a good perspective. We've talked a lot on this show about eliminating how to help people suffer less. It's kind of the underlying, right? We all suffer, but how do you suffer less after a major injury or incident or loss? And a lot of it comes down to not taking yourself so seriously, taking responsibility for your actions, but realizing life just doesn't happen to you. Like you can make choices.
Yeah.
And a lot of overcoming adversity is comes down to choice and also giving back. But I like that what chance isn't yours. So what chance makes yours is not really yours.
Yeah.
Is that the way it was said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because it's, yeah, sometimes we're dealt with cards that we deal with things here that maybe people in India, right, in Africa don't deal with. And we're actually not that special. There's billions of humans on this earth, and do the best we can with what we have, but don't take life so seriously. Have fun. I like that. But we've talked a lot about suffering on the show. And I know that from your perspective too, or your life
I
and what I've
noticed you're
learned about
bouncing.
you.
How are you doing that?
Huh?
I noticed you're bouncing. How are
Yeah,
you
so I'm on a ball. Everyone, I'm on a Swiss ball. So if you see my head bouncing, I just need to move all day long. And I'm of course in a very good position of my spine. Are you in a good position with your spine, Max? Yeah. Yeah. You are.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been really awesome to learn about your journey because in the world of medicine, and I work in the world of medicine and the world of fitness, because in the world of medicine, I come across many individuals who have had this major thing happen to them or diagnosis they receive. Maybe it's a diagnosis for a temporary one, like a strain or a sprain or something like that. Or it's a major diagnosis like spinal cord injury or something not as major like herniation in their spine. But I found that a lot of individuals have also, based on family background, the way they were raised, maybe their resilience before this injury, really like they kind of attach to this diagnosis and feel like they can't continue doing what they love because of this diagnosis and the way they feel. And I feel like in the Western medicine, we're so good at emergency medicine and tackling the problem right there, but not looking at the whole person. And so people get so attached to these diagnoses that they can't, and their injury, that they stop living a life they love. And so with you, what I found with the adaptive athletes, and which is why I'm very excited to share these stories, is that I feel like we are the most resilient humans on the planet. Like, not to say we all are adaptive in nature, and I'm kind of painting a picture here for you because this is what we talk about a lot on the show, is we all are adaptive because we all can change. However, those that have gone through these major life-changing events where their whole movement, life, mindset has had to shift completely, they are on the far end of the spectrum of adaptive because they've really had to change most things in their life. And while family, community, all that stuff matters and the way you're treated medically, what also matters is your mindset and how you've chosen to like search for that tribe, search for that way to practice and train again and do the things you love and not let that injury diagnosis hold you back. And so what I found with you, Max, is like I want you to share your story, but you are an adaptive athlete and I'd like you to share your adaptive story in a minute. But like I found that doesn't define you at all. That is just a way to help spread a positive message, help people eliminate suffering, and help people get out of their own way to be better humans. But that's not the first thing that comes out of your mouth. While it is a part of your life, like you have literally I feel like in a way, what did happen to you, you've allowed that to help you grow in ways that maybe you couldn't have without it. And
Yeah.
so, uh, without further ado, I'd like to hear where
Yeah.
you're from
Yeah.
first, and then we'll get into the story a bit.
Yeah. I was born in Fresno, California, Central California, and I grew up for most of my life in LA area, down north where you're at. And then I came up to the Bay Area for college in 1999, and I've been here ever since.
1999, like a party like it's 1999. Did you do that?
They played that so much at our graduation.
What college did you go to?
I was at Berkeley.
Berkeley. Okay. Did you run around naked too?
No, but I remember when I was there was a guy called the Naked Man who there was some ordinance where in Berkeley you didn't have to wear clothes if you didn't want to, and somebody on campus found this out and just went naked to all his classes for this whole 4 years.
The Naked
I
Man.
never saw him. It was like 30,000 students. I never saw him.
Right.
But,
Okay.
yeah, no, I had my clothes on to answer that question.
Okay. Awesome. So I know you have your own nonprofit, correct? Thegoodleg.org.
I mean, it makes no profit, so in that sense, it's a nonprofit. But
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
not 501c3 or whatever.
Got it. So you have goodleg.org, which is a website you've created, and that's been kind of a brand for you for a while.
Yeah.
Can you tell us the backstory behind goodleg.org?
Yeah.
Which I know goes into the accident that happened when you're young, but we'd like to hear about it.
Yeah. There's a lot there. Okay, to try to put it succinctly, when I was a young kid, when I was 8 years old, I got hit by a semi-truck, and it really mangled one of my legs, and it left me with a condition that was catastrophic and also very unique. And over the course of 8 years after the accident, I went through surgeries almost every year and physical therapy. And after everything was said and done, and I exited the healthcare system, I was just left with this mangled leg that's crooked, small, missing the whole outside of it, half my knee, half my thigh, half my calf. All the joints are deformed. All the bones are abnormally grown and twisted. It's just this weird mess. So I was left with that. And over the course of my adolescence, I just kind of habituated to the condition. But I was never satisfied with my condition. It was always a big hole in my life where I felt lacking, I felt incomplete, and I felt a bit ashamed. It was just something I didn't want to deal with, something I didn't want to reconcile. But it didn't crush me. I was still able to, I had a good high school life. I went to college, had a good college life. And then I started my career in consulting and finance after I left school. But it always sat in the corner, and it was this just part of my life that I locked away and kept somewhere. And it didn't seem like that big of a deal. Like I just got around it. But the older I got and the more self-reflective I got, and as the years went on, I was realizing that it was actually a really big problem for me in terms of my own self-actualization. I don't really like that word because it's so loaded.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I identified over time, and this is a long process, was it was the biggest obstacle in my life to me being vulnerable. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized how important being vulnerable is, in the sense of putting yourself in a situation where you're uncomfortable, where you don't know the answer, where you're trying to figure it out. At a certain point, I learned that that is where all learning in life takes place. And so by me having this part I was holding on to, and we can talk about the ways in which I was holding on to it. I was hiding it from everybody. I was hiding it from eventually even my family, my significant other I had for 8 years. And I never once let her see my leg. Okay. So I never took my brace off. and my brace weighs 8 pounds and it's made of like carbon fiber and steel. I slept with it when I was with her. I slept with it every night. So those are the kind of things I was doing, and that was the extent to which I was protecting myself. And at a certain point, I finally recognized how pernicious that activity was. So even though on the surface it looked like, hey, he's employed, he seems to be smiling most of the time, things are going good, there was this big emotional hole that I was, and I think maybe a lot of people can relate to this, and something traumatic that happened that they just don't want to touch. And so they do everything else over here to try to be the best person, but there's a section that's unreconciled. And once I realized how bad that was and how much it was stopping me, I began to delve into it. And I think, as you referenced before, it ended up being a tremendous learning experience for me, tackling that and really understanding the importance of all these things. And that's how I learned about vulnerability, was attacking that directly and seeing the results and saying, why is this so important and powerful? Oh, it's because I wasn't allowing myself to be vulnerable. So I wasn't able to try new things. I wasn't able to learn things as a result.
I remember having a conversation with you when you came down for the triathlon a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
And you actually wrote a blog about it, I believe, which I'd love to also share in the show notes with the audience, because that was probably another powerful time for you. In the interviews I've done, it's nice to be around other people who are adaptive, and to hear their stories and realize you're not alone. And that seemed like a really good experience for you, because you realized, maybe you didn't feel ready. I think it was something around not feeling ready for the race, or maybe it was showing your leg after that experience. You were like, yeah, I'm fine.
Actually, yeah. So for the triathlon, I ended up doing the mile swim, and I'm a bad swimmer. And I only trained for about a month, just go swim in the ocean for a mile. Never swam in a wetsuit before, never swam open water. But I wasn't worried at all about that. Honestly, my biggest concern was walking from the beach, like the part where we put our stuff, to the water. Like that, whatever, the 5-minute walk we had to make, and then getting out of the water with crowds of people around. That was what was going through my mind. That was the big issue. And actually that triathlon was like the first time I was in public with my leg exposed in front of strangers. That was on purpose. I mean, there was probably some times there were accidents or emergencies where I needed to do things, but that was the first time since I was in my, maybe middle school.
So how did you feel about that afterwards? That experience?
It was, like so many things in life and in this journey for me, it was incredibly anticlimactic in the sense that nobody cared,
Right.
It was a big experience for me, and I don't mean to say that to downplay the significance. It was phenomenal for me. But at the end of the day, it's just like, nobody cares. Everybody's here to swim. Everybody's nervous about the water. The people that are cheering other people on, they're stoked, and so you do it and it's over and you're like, wow, that was the big problem in my life. Like, that's what was keeping me from doing a cool event like this, where I could go learn how to swim in open water. And it was those little things where I was just like, man, I learned in the month I crammed for this swim race. It was like I learned how to swim better. I learned how to swim open water. I got all these things done. And it was by virtue of me putting myself in this vulnerable position. And there was just no downside. I mean, the downside was all inward facing. And it was a series of events like that over time where I kept taking one more step, and it reinforced what my hypothesis of, that was forming, that, hey, this wasn't a big deal. And if I truly care about living a better life, a further explored life, it really forces you to put that, what's on the other side of the scale, which is ultimately, my own vanity. And so when you're really forced to look at those things and you can't hide from them, it's like nobody else cares. It's just me that cares. And it's like, wow, am I going to be the one that stands in my own way here? And you do that enough times. And, I think in general in life, if you do that enough times, you that's just where you learn, and that's where you really start to not care about things that shouldn't matter and really focus on things that should. We have to go through those experiences. You can't just think
Right.
like, oh, I'm not vain. You have to put yourself in a position where you lay your vanity on the table.
I think that's a really important message. And in a lot of the interviews we've done so far have been letting go of, there's been most individuals have talked about that shame holding that in
Hmm.
because they don't want to be looked at or they fear what people think. And when it's letting that go and starting not to care and opening up and exposing yourself, you realize there's a lot of other people out there like me and I'm not alone. And it
Yeah.
isn't a big deal. But you touched on some really important things. I think that in general, people, whether you have a major injury or not, are held back by shame and are held back by caring about what other people think. And when really most people are just thinking about how to survive themselves,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, sure, people might look at you if you look different, and people might be silly. Instead of coming up and saying hello, they might say, hey, tell me about your leg or how'd you get injured, versus having a normal human conversation.
Yeah.
But for the most part, the people are just trying to survive. And the more you can just accept yourself and be open about your journey and be vulnerable with others, those you love, and realize that you can have a wonderful life and you can enjoy movement and you can be happy. You start letting go of what other people think and this dark cloud of shame that's held over you. And like you mentioned, it takes actionable steps of things like, yeah, I'm sure going into the triathlon, you mentioned you were nervous about being exposed in front of people, but once you did it, it became easier. So like you took a leap of faith and actionably went and put yourself in front of people in a very warm environment like the Challenge Athlete Foundation Triathlon, which is great. And then it's easier now for you to do that. And then you realize, oh my gosh, like everyone else is doing this. I'm not alone. Like I'm no different. People in triathlons or competitions anyway, like there are people that are new to them. There are many people that don't do them because they're ashamed of, maybe they don't feel like they're fit enough, good looking enough, whatever it is. It's like, well, you just start taking those steps and you go beyond what you think your mind can do, like what you believe you can do. You want to do a triathlon, then do it. Who cares how well you do at it? Just do it, and it'll get easier and easier and easier. But in Peter Levine's book, so Dr. Peter Levine does a lot of work on post-traumatic stress and suffering, trauma, and it's all about action, doing something actionable to help your mind heal. So by you taking action to put yourself in situations, you're a CrossFit coach, you do CrossFit, you do triathlons, to challenge yourself, it's easier now for your mind to be open, less ashamed.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very powerful message for people. And so when did you start goodleg.org?
So let's see. Like actually, the site, I can't remember the exact date I made the site, but it was, let's see, I'm 37, probably about 5 years ago that I really conceptualized the Good Leg Project. So it was, my backstory. I lived most of my life unsatisfied, and then I got to a point in my early 30s where I was taking time off work and I was reevaluating where I wanted to go with my life, and a lot of things happened, and we can talk about that if you want to. But I came to the conclusion ultimately that I wanted to. I realized I'd given a pretty poor effort my whole life to actually trying to solve my own dissatisfaction. I left it in the hands of professionals in the medical industry. And I don't mean that in like a pejorative sense. I mean, I had amazing surgeons and a probably good physical therapists and people who cared about me and helped me. And you know, it was a miracle they kept my leg at all and all those things. However, I've always failed to recognize where healthcare, you know, as it's defined in most of our life ends and my responsibility really begins. You made a comment earlier about Western medicine, how they're really good with emergency problems. I would add on to that and just saying really acute problems, these, you know, complicated, you have to cut open someone's body and rearrange things, and something broke off, you got to attach it, and then you got to figure out how to put it back together and then deal with the scar tissue. And you know, it's amazing, right? And with no infection, those are things you can never do on your own. However, that patches up these very acute problems, and from there on out, most of the things to do with the human body and then also the emotional baggage that comes with it, this is a process, like a lifelong process that you deal with, like with all trauma. It's like it's a process, a way you approach it and a way you deal with it, and no one really does that for you. Maybe I could add a therapist that could have kicked me in the right direction, but even then, this is a daily thing. And I had never really taken up that mantle. I never really engaged with it on a daily basis. And so the Good Leg Project was my representation of doing that. And specifically why I started it and like put it online was early on, I realized through events like the one in San Diego and my early times in CrossFit, I recognized that this is a hard problem. You know, this problem of Max and his shame with his specific complicated medical condition. I saw experts, they kind of did the best they could. And if I'm not satisfied, I can't disrespect the problem by not sharing it with everybody. If I really hope that anybody's going to help me in any way, like how backwards looking is it that I'm holding on to all the information and I'm doling it out, not at all, or in very, you know, I give them an admission ticket once they prove themselves to not, you know, be a threat to me. I started to change my perspective of, okay, if I want to make any progress in this hard problem, I have to tell everybody about it all the time. I have to share everything. And that was one of my big learnings. I have to show everybody my condition. I have to do things that exposes my problems so people can see my problems. I have to build a story of my problems, of what I'm trying to do, what problems I'm running into, not just hypotheticals. I need to be comfortable talking about it. I mean, I got down to where I launched the site, and originally I wrote a one-pager about this is what happened to me and this is my condition. And then I started adding videos of like, this is what I can do right now. And you know, in tennis and snowboarding, and these are the things I want to do, so you can get a real view. And this is what my leg looks like, and this is how it functions. And then I went out and I got all my medical records and I scanned them all and I put them all online. It's probably horrible for my own personal privacy, but
minus your social security number.
Yeah, that's probably somewhere. You'll find that, whoever's watching this. I put everything up there. So, and then I made business cards with my project and the website. And if I met anybody that seemed to have any interest in learning about what I was doing and what I wanted to accomplish, all I just had to say, hey, if you're interested, like you've been listening to me for the last 30 minutes, like here's my card, all my information's on there. And if you want to dig into it, I would love to. That's what it's up there for. And so it doesn't put the onus or the burden on other people to help you. It's like I was trying to bend over backwards to convince somebody that it'd be a good idea to spend some of their free time in helping me. And that's where the Good Leg Project, the genesis of it was, and it kind of morphed into some other stuff later on. But yeah, that was my original vision, and it worked out very, very well for me.
Well, so one of the things I've learned a lot from you is just about this self-advocacy. And that's really that seems like how the underlying theme of it, the Good Leg Project, was just you've had to advocate for yourself, and you've I know that some of the project shows you working on your own orthotic because you're doing high intensity functional movement, you're snowboarding, and but you really had to like help your orthotist help you, like be there with them, working with them. and
Yeah.
also building your own. You've been talented enough to also build, right, your own orthotic or pieces of it. So but I think that self advocacy, I that's very important for anyone. Like, we just did a Facebook Live in our Movement RX Facebook group about self advocacy going into your doctor or even with a coach, like how to talk to them about your injury and what you need. But I think that that's really important. And I think that's where in our society, people can get stuck with this diagnosis and they wait and wait and wait for a doctor to do something, or a PT or chiro. And they wait and they don't do anything themselves. So like a question that I ask people is, well, what have you been doing since your injury? Like, how have you been taking care of yourself? Icing. Usually I get the ice, rest. Well, I'm kind of eating healthy, but people aren't actually doing self-care to their tissue. They aren't actually mobilizing. It's typically what I get. And, or sometimes with adaptive athletes, it's, well, I haven't done anything because I didn't like, I don't know what's next. Like, what coach can help me? Like, the PT can only go so far. And so, but the people that have ended up coming into my classes, so Max also teaches an adaptive athletics class up in San Francisco at San Francisco CrossFit. Mine down in San Diego, like, people have had to search me out and find me. But I found that those individuals like you, Max, are super resilient because they've sought out like what they want, and they know they can't do it alone, but they know that they're not going to get this kind of coaching at maybe 24-hour fitness where they did go, but they need someone who understands them. So they've had to search it and ask and not give up. And in our culture and the way Western medicine is, and I'm a PT, I've had to advocate for myself too in what I need. So you can't just sit back and wait for stuff to happen to you. Like, if you want something, go out and learn. Like, you probably had to learn a little bit about engineering of a device to help yourself.
Yeah.
If I want to be a good business owner and run a digital company, or if I want to, be really good in the neuro field, then I need to go out and learn more. I'm not just going to wait for, something to happen. Like, one video I make to go viral. Like, I need to learn about the internet. I need to learn about neuro and the body and spinal cord. And so I think that that's a really strong message. So if anyone, we'll put a link to Good Leg Project. Is it goodleg.org or Good Leg Project?
It's goodleg.org.
Okay.
It's also goodlegproject.com, but it's called the Good Leg Project.
Okay. Now, what I do find interesting is, I might have spoken to you about this too. Like, so in PT, when someone injures their leg, they call that good leg, bad leg, right? Good leg.
Before we jump to another subject, I wanted to touch on that because I think it's really important. And when I talk to any other individual with a conspicuous problem, so some kind of impairment, and that's what I work with a lot, this is one of my major things that I talk about. And I actually don't use the term self-advocacy just because it means a lot of things to a lot of people. And I think a lot of people, when they think of self-advocacy, they just think of, even though this is not the strict definition of the word, they think of like, oh, I need my insurance company to pay for more stuff, and I need the system to change, and it is this way, and it should be this way. And there is a time and a place for that. But that is a slow moving process. That is trying to get an insurance company to do something. Not to say you shouldn't push on them, but you can't sit around and say, oh, the healthcare system is this way and I'm trying to change it and it's not changing, so I'm screwed. That takes a long time, and I recognize that. And so what I wanted to focus on was everything that I could do myself that would enable me to work with the current structures as efficiently and effectively as possible. And there wasn't really a word for it, so I usually call it something like condition mastery. That's a term I've told other people. And I say, if you want to advance your condition, because you've probably had the surgeries, you've probably got the devices, you probably did the PT, like they told you what to do and you did it and you're still unsatisfied. So I think the most prudent course of action for anybody, I mean, in any problem, is if you really want to conquer it, you need to be a master of this problem, meaning you need to know the problem backwards and forwards. Like, you need to be one of the experts in the room. And that doesn't mean that you need to go become a physical therapist or become a surgeon or whatever you need, but at a minimum, you need to know everything about the history of your condition. You need to be the walking, talking repository of all the information that someone, an expert, would want about your case. It isn't, tell me your case history. And you're like, oh, well, this kind of happened, and I think this happened. They're not going to go back and read your medical files. Like, they don't have time. You need to be the embodiment of your medical files. You need to say, this is when that happened, and then we tried this, and then my last doctor was thinking this, and then we tried these things, and I tried this. So very quickly, you can enable the person you're working with, whatever professional it is, PT, OT, surgeon, device maker, oncologist, whatever it is, you need to be feeding them everything. You need to become the perfect patient. And not because, it's fair, that's the way it should work. It's because there are going to be a few people that get extraordinary outcomes. That's just the law, the statistical normal distribution of how every injury is going to fall out. And the people who get the best outcomes are the people who are masters of their condition, who are the perfect patients, who give the doctors the last piece of data they need to make the better decision, who gets the people they're working with so excited that they actually say, hey, I'm going to stay another 30 minutes after my patient load, because they work all day. They're not just working with you. They have 20 minutes with you, 20 minutes with 10 other people that day. At the end of the day, they're like, I'm going to spend 30 more minutes because that person's so dedicated and so committed that I'm going to feel like I'm not doing my job if I don't meet their dedication. And that is another key aspect, is if you're stuck at a dead end in your condition and you want to break the mold, you need to be a mold breaker, because you'll inspire other people to be mold breakers. And that's the only way it's going to work. Very rarely are you going to meet a Teresa who has dedicated herself to, something that's really complicated and there's not a straightforward path. You're going to get the average, response from everybody. And so if you want extraordinary care, you need to be an extraordinary patient. And so in hindsight, this looks completely obvious, right? But it never dawned on me. I never thought I could have a seat at the table, and frankly, you can just go as deep as you want to go. And I've gone really deep. I design my own devices. I fabricate my own devices. I became a strength and conditioning coach. I reflect on these things a great amount. I started the Good Leg Project as a way to help other people kind of see this different way of looking at things. But I will say, in the first 6 months of starting the project for myself was when I saw so many gains. It was just like, oh, I should have been doing this since I was 9. I would have been on point, on the cusp, ready to receive the best care, or as opposed to just kind of waiting around and being in the state of limbo I was there for decades.
Right. Well, so a master of your own condition.
Yeah.
I think that's crucial. That is, whether you have a temporary wound too, or I have patients that come in to see me who have things that will get better, but they've done a plethora of things. They've studied up on it. They want to learn more from me. I love those patients because it's a movement education versus people coming in and saying, just fix me. I don't get a ton of those. We can pick our patients, but but that is something that in the medical world that can happen to people when this thing happens to you based on a trauma, or maybe it's a preventable injury. People don't go out and learn about their body. I had an athlete who had a reticulolisthesis, which is a slippage in her spine, like on the vertebral body. So she had a reticulolisthesis, which can be very severe if it goes too far, because it's the spinal cord. It's around the spinal cord. And the common feedback I got was, well, I don't know what's going on in there, so I'm just going to keep moving and pushing myself, and we'll see what happens. So there I get kind of those two different people who just continue going after, pushing themselves, not not understanding what's going on with their body. So they're just like, well, one day it's going to get better. If I rest a little bit, I'm just going to keep pushing myself, but not learn about my body. And then there's the other that rests too much, doesn't do anything, sits around, lets themselves go. There's people in between too. But the point is, whatever injury you have, be a master of your condition. Learn about it. Don't be afraid of it, and help to improve it. When you go in to see your doctor, ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. So thank you for that. What I was saying about good leg was in PT, we oftentimes in school, they taught us, all right, if someone injured their ACL, the side that's injured is the bad leg. The other side is the good leg.
They actually taught you that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I don't use those terms, but I actually, with your website and this brand you have, I'm like, both legs are good. Both legs. Like your orthotic side is a good leg too. What makes it bad? So I that always comes to mind when I see the good leg. I'm just like, well, which one are you talking about? Both. What about both? So anyway, thank you for that, Max. I think anyone listening, most people listening have been through some great adversity in their life, whether it's injury or loss, can take something from that. So, okay. So now I want to talk about functional movement for you, and what has been the biggest challenge for you in terms of movement with your orthotic? Like, what movements are the most challenging for you?
Well, my ankle doesn't bend. It doesn't dorsiflex, so the knee doesn't want to come forward and go over the foot. And then my knee is unstable. And then my whole leg is crooked at about a 45-degree angle in flexion. So my foot wants to stick out to the side. My foot doesn't want to bend up, and my knee is really shaky. I think that's the simplest way I can put it. So anything that requires your ankle or knee is a problem to start with. So squatting, lunging,
all movements.
running, pushing, generating power, period. That leg is those are the things that I have to be the most creative when solving these movement problems.
Okay. And you have gotten creative. Yeah.
I just actually figured out a new way to do double unders, which I'm really excited about because I think I don't want to put myself ahead of me doing it, but I think I'm going to finally crack the nut on that one. I have no calf function on one leg, so jump roping's impossible. It's basically one legged roping the whole time. And double unders have been difficult to do more than a couple in a row.
So what have you done to help with those?
So I was in class with Kelly, and we were talking about trying to maximize tissue springiness. And so I was playing with staggering my feet when I jump rope. And that's one of the main learnings I've learned. If you don't have symmetrical legs, it doesn't necessarily make sense to keep them in a symmetrical stance. And I learned a lot through lunging and squatting and generating power, changing up things. But with double under specifically, I actually found by moving in the opposite direction, moving my weaker leg backward, I can keep it in a lower degree of knee flexion and actually utilize the hip extension springiness. So I put my hip into a little bit of extension. It also keeps my knee a little less bent when I'm rebounding. And it also preloads my dorsiflexion. So all these things combine to give me a little bit of tissue response, even though I don't have a calf. And it's already significantly better. So I'm
nice.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if I can pull it off. And not that double unders matter. It's just I'm a coach, and it's always fun to conquer each little piece. And that's one of the things about functional fitness in general. It's like you just take the human body and you learn all the things that it's capable of in its kind of the prototypical example, like how it can look, what it can do. And then you take your broken body, your body with a problem, with an impairment, then you overlay the two. And just that action in and of itself taught me so much about what my diagnosis, what my condition actually is. Because, I learned the terms, the limb salvage, and I learned, eventually learned the name of every little aspect of my leg that's affected and how it's affected. But in terms of how it works for my life, it's really about what happens when I attempt to do work with my body. Fancy way of something, just try to do something with my body and then seeing what happens, the fallout. And if you don't even know what's supposed to happen, like which direction your knee's supposed to go in, what's your hip supposed to do when you do this, how you generate power, how you generate stability, all those basic things. If you don't know them, then you don't really know what the problem is. And once I started to learn that language of the physical body, then I could go back in and talk to my experts and say, and this is just why functional movements is so important for everybody, but especially if you have an impairment, you can start really talking about very acute, specific examples down to the joint where you're having problems. And then you give that to a professional, and it's just a much more high resolution problem for them, rather than walking in and saying, I can't run.
Right.
Make me run. That is such a complicated mess of emotional equipment, conditioning, movement pattern problem. But if you walk in there and say, hey, when I run at about 3 miles, I have an issue where my hip starts to deviate over my foot and I start to get really tight, my oblique. That's a conversation for a physical therapist. That's a conversation for a running coach. That's a conversation even for an equipment maker.
Right.
It's just the difference between walking in with those two questions or problems is just night and day.
Right.
What you're going to get out of it.
Well, it's the master of your own condition.
Yeah.
So not being afraid to try things. We are designed to move. So I think that was one big thing about our course that we created together, which is the functional training for the adaptive athlete course. Link will be in the show notes too, is what does normal movement look like? What is the principles of normal movement? And then where do you stand in relation to that? And no one actually moves perfectly. We've all got a little bit of dysfunction, but you with a salvage limb have had to learn compensatory patterns. These compensatory patterns are what have saved you and allowed you to run and allowed you to squat. But you have to self-study it, because there really isn't a lot of therapists or doctors who know how to do that. They don't have the time and they don't take the time. So that goes back to mastery of self. So in terms of, and if you all want to learn, so in the course, we actually break down, you have these modules. One is lower extremity, someone who has lower extremity, maybe a missing limb or a salvage limb, or dysfunction of some sort. Someone who has an upper extremity dysfunction, salvage limb, amputation, or fusion. And we have wheelchair, and then neurological or invisible wounds. So there's 4 different modules. And if you're a coach listening or an individual with any one of those impairments I mentioned, or overarching conditions, then you're going to want to check out the course, because it has a plethora of information on how to adapt to squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling, carrying, which are the primal movements of life. You're going to need to do them anyway. They're just going to look a little different, and you're going to learn about the stimulus. So you're going to learn about what is required for those movements. So when you go into a training session, or you're training at home, or you're moving around, you can understand how to do those movements more effectively, so your body can stay healthy and mobile. And if you have anything to add to that, Max, feel free.
I think the point is, with these movements, you have to do them. It doesn't matter what happened to you. You have to be able to sit down and stand up. You have to be able to get on the floor and get off the floor. You have to be able to push things, pull things, lift things up. What happened? How your body currently functions, the movements don't care. If you want to be an independent person, you have to solve these things. And unfortunately, one of the main ways we learn how to do this stuff is we just watch other people and say, oh, that's how he does it. He looks like he knows what he's doing. I'm just going to copy them. But if you have a body that's a little more unique or a little asymmetrical, you can't just copy people. So you need to put a little more thought into it. And luckily, Teresa and I have put a lot of thought into it. And even if you can never be perfect, like my leg is messed up, it's never going to be perfect, but it can still be there's still an optimal version of me to move. And there is no way that anybody comes in at optimal, and no one ever actually hits optimal. It's just a process you go through to get better and better. And when I came in, I didn't run, I didn't hike, I didn't know how to squat, I was unbalanced, I'd fall over. All these things were a problem, but then after I spent time with them, I was able to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the bottom line. There are things that you can do now, and there are things you can do in the future they don't currently know. And so it's just about finding the right way to think about it and look at it so you get them done.
Right. And that leads me into my last question too, is so actually I've nixed that. 2 questions left. One, what advice, you already have given some really good nuggets here, but what advice would you give someone, maybe a kid who's experienced the same thing you did or something similar, or an individual who has a similar condition, salvage limb or an amputation, who, what advice would you give them?
So the basic advice, and this is for somebody with a salvage limb or any impairment problem, you want to solve your problem. You've seen all the experts already. There's 4 things I recommend that you need to do. If I can remember them all, maybe it will be less. Number 1, you need to know your condition backwards and forwards. You need to know everything about your condition, where you as a person intersect with the medical condition, so you can meet professionals halfway and help them. Number 2, I said before, you need to share everything with everybody. You need to make it as easy as possible for everybody else to find out about you. Third, you need to work as hard as anybody else that you hope will work hard for you. So nobody is going to spend their extra time, their nights and their weekends, if you're not doing it. But if you're spending your nights and your weekends and all your free time trying to solve these things, you will end up inspiring other people to do the same.
Yeah.
And then finally, you have to live your goals. So it's not good enough to have aspirations of, oh, I wish I could do this. It would be great if this wasn't a problem anymore. You need to go out and run into that problem on a daily basis. And then when you do that, number 1, you're going to learn the most critical things you need to know to tell other people to help you. And number 2, you actually walk in with a story that inspires people. If you just talk about wanting to do something, everybody wants to do a million things, and we're all going to die wanting to do a million things. We can't do all the things we want or wish we could do. But if you walk in with a very concrete story of, I'm trying to do this, I tried last week, I failed, I tried yesterday, I failed in a different way. Can you help me with these failure problems? Can you help me with this, my tired back, or a blister I have, or a broken device, or emotional problems? Like, actually demonstrating that you're doing these things is just tremendous in anything you want to accomplish.
Yeah, I love it. And we'll put those 4 things in the show notes as well. So awesome, Max. Last question for you. What does so New Normal, the name of this podcast is My New Normal, and we can have many new normals in our life, right? So after your accident, you had to create this new normal, and you can create an optimal new normal. After someone has a child, they have a new normal in their life. After they start a new business, it could be a number of things. Getting in a relationship, you have a new normal. So tell us what your new normal looks like today.
Yeah.
From the morning to the night.
Oh God, my life nowadays. So I'm a functional movement coach and a strength and conditioning coach at San Francisco CrossFit. So I'm up at 4 a.m. normally.
Ooh.
And I like waking up early in the morning. Probably wouldn't be that early if people didn't like working out so early. I think maybe 6 would be a better. But I don't mind. Like, I don't go out at night anymore. So wake up at 4. Enough time where I can have coffee and eat has to happen, and then enough time where I can read a little bit of philosophy in the morning.
What philosophy are you reading right now?
So I like. I know that sounds super pretentious. It's just
No.
I like to do it.
If you want to know, I say wisdom. Look at ancient philosophers.
I think the important thing is I hate running out the door and like putting everything on and then all of a sudden I'm working or I'm on email. I just want to have a little bit of time in the morning to feel like this is my day. I can sit down, I can read for 10 minutes. And then when I get there, it's like, oh, I walk in, I've already been having my day, then my first client comes in. So I'm big into moral philosophy. I like all the philosophies that attempt to help people live a better life. So not the abstract things that are like, what's the meaning of reality and the definition of words. It's literally how can you behave in a certain way to help brace yourself for the inevitable tragedies in life. Everybody has tragedies. How do you arm yourself against those things? So all the Greek guys, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, these are actually making a comeback now in terms of popularity. Epictetus, and then Buddhist philosophy as well is on this same vein. Reduction of suffering specifically. So I love touching on those things just to remind you, again, you can't take your life too seriously. Everybody's going to die. Enjoy the day. Do what you can. Take as much responsibility as you can. You need to be reminded of that all the time.
Yeah.
So then I jump on my motorcycle and I drive over to San Francisco CrossFit. I spend usually 4 hours in the morning there. And then I come home, and this is going to be an amalgamation of days.
Yeah.
I work on my brace. So it's my hobby. I have my exoskeleton I wear on my leg every day, and I engage with it every day to try to make it a little bit better. And then after that, I spend time on goodleg.org, which is my platform to help other people approach their problems the same way I've approached mine. And then adaptive athletic, which is my specific strength and conditioning practice to help people with physical impairments. Inspire them to live a active life and have a physical practice. And then also to inspire other coaches and professionals that it is possible to coach this population to great effect. Yeah. And then I come home and I see my girlfriend at night, and we have dinner, and then do boring stuff like go to sleep at 8:30 p.m.
Yeah, I know. I love that when I ask this question because it's life. I like to read before bed too, and I go to bed at 9:30. There really isn't anything like extremely exciting, but it's calming. I like doing calming things. So that's awesome, Max. Well, I hope you all can hear this when you do listen and hear this, to please pay it forward and share it with someone you love. But I hope you can see why I feel so blessed to get to work with you, Max, because you are highly intelligent, self-advocate is my term, but also just very self-aware of your condition, and have taught me so much about working with adaptive athletes and helping me become a better coach, especially as a medical professional. You've been you're very wise beyond your years. So I appreciate also you sharing your morning routine with us, because I think there's a beauty in that when people can actually take time in the morning just for themselves. I find it's truly that time, and then a couple hours before bed is the only time I have to myself. And I choose quiet, no screens, just myself, writing, reading sometimes, or meditating. But we touched upon a lot of good things, and I'm hoping that whoever listens to this gets into the functional fitness environment ASAP and starts exploring their movement and their body. And if you want to reach out to Max, what's the best way to reach out to you?
You can reach out to me at max@goodleg.org. That's probably the best.
We'll put that in the show notes as well. And with that, Max, high five to you virtually. All right, everyone, have a good one. I hope you're inspired by this and please share it.